You're listening to the Positive Thread Podcast. I'm Heather McConaughey, your host. Welcome to today's episode, Overcoming Burnout. Have you found yourself struggling to get out of bed in the morning, hitting the snooze button, not wanting to get up to go to your job? When you're at your job, are you miserable? Are you counting the hours, waiting to go home? When you get home, are you exhausted and you don't want to socialize or go out or do anything or do your chores? Do you feel more depressed and irritable lately? Do you feel more apathetic about your job, and has your performance decreased? If so, guys, these are all signs of burnout, and I'm here to tell you that I am a burnout survivor. I have gone through the dark tunnel of burnout a couple of times, and I've come out the other side, and I am never going back, okay? Hold me to account for that. I am never going back because it's freaking miserable. And today I really want to talk about burnout because I think it is such a huge issue for people. I see clients come to me who have a lot of physical symptoms that are really not because they're not taking care of themselves, like with nutrition and fitness. Sometimes that's the issue, but a lot of times it's because they're burned out and they are running on fumes trying to live their healthiest life, and that's just not possible. So I'm going to talk today about some of the signs and symptoms of burnout, how to identify it for yourself. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own story, and then I'm going to give you some actionable steps that you can take today to start healing from burnout. So my story with burnout starts in Los Angeles, the city of dreams. I lived in LA for about 6 years, and I got a job that I was super passionate about. And the job was almost like a lifestyle because it required me to work 6 days a week. I worked Monday through Friday from 9:30 in the morning to 10 p.m. And I worked Saturdays from 9:30 in the morning to about 4 p.m., 3 of 4 Saturdays a month. So I got one full weekend off a month. And you might say, Heather, that's crazy. Why did you do that job? Well, I was super passionate about the company and what they were doing, and I wanted to be part of it. And when I started, it was awesome. It was intense, but I loved it. I felt fully alive. Well, fast forward to about a year and a half later, and I realized that the pace that I was working at and the life I was living was not sustainable. You know, I basically stopped working out. I neglected my fitness because I had very little time to work out. I was not meal prepping appropriately, so I was eating out a lot of meals. And as you can imagine, I had very little time to socialize or do fun things or just enjoy life. My life was go, go, go. And on top of that, I had a high pressure job. You know, I had a sales target I had to meet every quarter. I was struggling in the job. I wasn't performing well, so my boss wasn't happy with me. And it was just a really tough situation. I realized that I was very unhappy, and the thing that made me realize I needed to make a change was I traveled to Oregon to see my family for a week. And when I realized I had to go back to that job, I was like burst into tears. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And I gave notice to the job. I gave them a couple months notice actually, so they have plenty of time to find somebody. And I said my goodbyes. Well, that first month, I felt depressed. I was exhausted mentally, physically, emotionally. And I remember that first month, I didn't do very much. I kind of laid around. By the second month, I started to kind of like get my groove back, start working out. I was like going back to school. So I was like getting into a groove. By the third month, I was like, okay, I think I'm starting to come back to life here. My second time with burnout revolves around my nursing career. As you can imagine, nursing is an intense occupation, and there's lots of different kinds of nurses. So there's nurses that, you know, are working in an office setting and their jobs maybe aren't as stressful as someone who's working, you know, in a busy emergency department. But that's not to say that nursing jobs are not stressful. Okay. Like no matter what kind of nursing you do, it's probably one of the highest stress jobs because you are constantly taking care of people who are sick, who need something from you, and you literally are nursing them. Like they are sucking at your teat. Okay. They need you to get them things. They need you to get them drugs. They need to be watched by you because they're under medications. And I recently had to have surgery and I got to be taken care of by an amazing nurse. And it really showed me like how needy patients could be because I was so needy during that time. And it made me appreciate nurses so much more, even though I had been one. So nurses are really susceptible to burnout, and careers that involve a high degree of interacting with other people in service have a high degree of burnout. Things like police officers, teachers, social workers, all of these types of careers can be very susceptible to burnout. Also, high achievers are susceptible to burnout because we tend to think that we can do it all. And we tend to push ourselves harder and harder and harder because we think that more is better and that that's going to get us the results that we want. Unfortunately, we are all human, okay? We are not robots yet. And we cannot sustain unrelenting levels of stress in our lives. Our world is already stressful, and then you add on top of that super stressful jobs, you are setting yourself up for a perfect storm of burnout. So burnout is a state of chronic stress. And what does that look like? It looks like physical and emotional exhaustion, cynicism and detachment, lacking effectiveness, and feeling a lack of accomplishment. So I realized that I was suffering from burnout yet again in my nursing career when I realized I was having tons of physical symptoms. So I would come home and be exhausted, but have a lot of trouble falling asleep. I was what you would call tense, tired. So I was really tired, but my body and mind wasn't relaxed. My nervous system was on high alert still. I would have trouble sleeping, and then I would wake up still exhausted. So like I couldn't fall asleep. And then like when I did sleep, I'd wake up during the night and then I just like woke up feeling exhausted. So I was super tired all the time. And I was having like headaches all the time. And I thought it was due to my allergies, but it was really due to stress. And I was also having a lot of negative emotions. Like I was feeling just kind of depressed and sad. And then I would also feel really irritable though. And I would like lose my temper like super easily. And I hated this about myself, but I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like what is wrong with me? I realized that I was suffering from burnout again, and it had snuck up on me. I thought I had been doing a really good job of taking care of myself. I was exercising, eating well. I was doing my best to sleep, socialize, and take care of myself. But all of a sudden it snuck up on me. And this is how burnout works. It can be very insidious. Like you can think everything's fine, and then one day you wake up and you're completely burnt out. And I was working as an emergency room nurse for 2.5 years. I was exposed to constant trauma, constant stress. And look, maybe some people thrive off of that, but most of the people who work in those professions have signs of burnout. And a lot of them know it, but still don't do anything about it. And their managers don't do anything about it either. I think ERs should have a regular masseuse that walks around and gives everyone shoulder massages. And they should build that into the budget if they want to retain nurses. So I realized that I was having all of these signs of burnout again. And I had a conversation with my mom where I really was like, I can't do this anymore. At that moment, I was actually thinking of just quitting and going and getting a part-time job at Whole Foods, which I loved going to because we all know I love, creating meals and I love grocery shopping. And I thought, hey, that looks fun. And I would just take a month to relax and not do anything while I recovered. I decided instead that I would start creating a business because that actually was really inspiring to me. And I realized that I didn't want to just go be an employee for somebody else. I actually wanted to create my dream life with freedom. So I stayed at my job while I started creating my business. But in the meantime, I really had to deal with the burnout. So let's talk about some of the signs and symptoms of burnout so you can be aware of it if it's happening to you. So physical and emotional exhaustion. So here are some of the signs and symptoms of physical and emotional exhaustion. chronic fatigue, like just always being exhausted no matter how much sleep you get. That's a red flag. Insomnia, so either having trouble falling asleep or having trouble staying asleep, waking up in the middle of the night. Having forgetfulness, lack of concentration, decreased memory. That's another sign. A lot of people have physical signs and symptoms, like they'll have unexplained headaches or GI distress. They might go to a doctor and try to seek treatment, but the doctor can't find some particular cause of the symptom. That could definitely be burnout. Increased illness. Because of that constant state of stress, your immune system is taxed and you will have decreased immunity and an inability to fight off viruses and bacteria as well. Loss of appetite. You might either, not feel hungry, or you might be using food to cope with your stress and overeating. I've definitely done that when I'm in burnout. Anxiety, that's a huge one. Just like you might feel especially anxious, not know why. Depression, because when we have constant negative emotions like stress put on us and we're not able to recover from them, we can turn those emotions inward on ourselves, and that can manifest as depression. Or alternatively, you can direct those negative experiences and stress onto others, and that will come out as anger or irritability towards others. So people in burnout also have cynicism and detachment. So, just being cynical, like having no sense of hope, no sense of positivity about other people or the world, seeing everything through, the glass is half empty, just being very pessimistic. Okay. So that's a sign of detachment. If you feel a loss of joy, if like the things that you used to do don't bring you joy anymore, that's a sign of burnout. Being pessimistic, isolating yourself from others. I totally did this when I'm in burnout. I, would feel like lonely. Like I was like, I want to go socialize and see people because I've been working for 3 days, but then I would be like, I'm too exhausted to interact with others. I'm just going to stay home. That's a very classic sign of burnout. And just feeling very detached from your work. So like this can manifest in nursing as like just not caring about your patients. Like you really don't care about them. You don't have empathy or compassion for them anymore. That's a red flag. And, other signs are apathy, feeling hopeless, increased irritability, and decreased productivity. So you can see burnout's really serious because if you don't manage it, it's going to cause physical and emotional symptoms that are going to wreak havoc on your life. They're going to destroy your relationships, they're going to isolate you, and they're going to lead to physical ailments. So what do you do, okay? Because this sounds pretty dire. And you can feel trapped because if you're in a career that you're burnt out in, but you have invested money and time and years of your life into this career, you may feel like it's the only option for you. And it can be really scary to think about like leaving the career to seek something else, but like that it's not going to work because you're so unhappy and exhausted. So what do you do? So I'm going to give you some actionable steps. Step 1, let this be a wake-up call to you. You need to admit to the burnout. You are a burnout addict, okay? So you first have to admit that you have burnout. And it's not a sign of failure. It's not a sign that there's something wrong with you. It's a sign that you're human and that the situation that you've been in is extremely stressful. And acknowledge yourself that you've made it this far. Like most people would have been out after a month and you've stayed and you've served people in a way. But like now it's time to admit that you have burnout. And just remember that no one can serve in the war zone forever. There's a reason that soldiers come home between tours of duty, because that constant stress and trauma is like human beings just can't handle it after a certain point. And it's not a weakness and it's not a failure. It's just being human. So that's step 1. Just admit like, okay, I've got signs and symptoms of burnout. Number 2, you need to start scaling back. If you're working overtime and picking up overtime shifts, you need to first stop that. Number 1, okay? So stop working overtime if you're doing that. If you're staying late in the office or picking up extra projects for your boss, if you're always saying yes, you need to start setting better boundaries and saying no to things. And it's completely okay to say no. Okay? You also need to take your vacation days. If I met you and you have 150 hours of vacation banked, you need to take a week off right now. You need to probably take 2 weeks off. Okay? So you need to scale back your work and take some vacation days pronto. The next thing that you need to do, step number 3, you need to start practicing really good self-care. Look, when I was in burnout, I wasn't able to immediately